Hey everyone, so I'm making a game that's essentially a medieval fantasy sandbox where you can build houses, towns, and castles. You can run any business, a blacksmith, a farm, a tavern. You can explore the world, including caves and dungeons, and fight dragons, and finally be able to build an army to expand and govern your kingdom, which will probably involve either fighting as a soldier in an army on behalf of a lord or even leading your own army to expand your own territory. So fairly ambitious game. We'll see where this goes. But I've been thinking about the fundamental qualities of what makes a great game, and this is highly subjective, of course. This is just kind of my opinion. But I think for me, there are five factors that make a game really stand out for me. Probably the first thing that comes to mind is that the game needs to be deeply immersive, and it should never compromise immersion for convenience that we see a lot of modern games kind of have the trend doing. So that's really the core mission of this game is to build a sandbox in a medieval fantasy world where you can really do anything, and really give the creativity and freedom back to the player. A great game, number two, I think can be played endlessly. A classic like chess. Number three, this might be somewhat controversial. For me, I think a great game should be multiplayer. At the very least, it should let the player share an experience with a friend or their spouse or partner. Or it can also, ideally, can also help build meaningful connections between players who didn't previously know each other, online multiplayer setting. Four, I think a great game should be fun to play. It's easy to pick up, hard to master, and gamers when they're playing this game should not be playing it to just get somewhere, grind for some end result like equipment, a weapon, loot. But the journey itself is intrinsically enjoyable. It's fun to play. And finally, number five, this might be difficult to deliver on, but I think a great game towards the end of the game, delivers a profound message. One of the games that really stand out in my mind, and this is not, I think, a game that's very popular, but Arcanum of Steamworks and Magic Obscura, made by Troika, who also made Fallout 1, Fallout 2. But I thought Arcanum delivered a really profound message towards the end where, spoiler alert, so the final villain of the game was a necromancer who came to the philosophical conclusion that life is the anti-state, and death is the natural state. And so his mission was to obliterate all life. And I thought that was like a really interesting take, a philosophical take, that provided the justification, the motivation for the game's central villain. Okay, so on to the main topic for today, which over the past couple of days I've been stuck on working on scene changes. So I'm gonna show like what is working, and then I'll actually also talk about why what I've done is actually a really bad idea and it's kind of a fail. And talk a little bit about what I kind of want to rebuild and do next. So I'll just kind of show how this works. So I figured out scene changes, and this is now kind of working. So you can defeat these enemies, and you can see there's a staircase right in the middle there. And that's going to take you into the caves. And this cave is going to be procedurally generated, and then when you come back up, the enemies are not there anymore. Otherwise, they will respawn. But it basically saves one world before taking you to another world. So this was quite tricky. I thought scene changes was going to be pretty simple from the user's perspective. It's just like fade out, fade in, flipping the page of a book, right? But dealing with scene changes means going quite into the back end of how the infrastructure of the game works in Godot. It means figuring out how to completely unload a scene tree and load a new one. It means dealing with saving scene data and making it persist across scenes. So dealing with saved games and what data to save. So in this case, all the enemies and their enemy types and their enemy positions need to be saved. before we change scenes. And right now we're not saving the arrows or the projectiles, but if we wanted to, we could also save data like that. For like a simple 2D platformer, you can imagine like level switching is quite easy. But if you're building a sandbox game like Minecraft and you want to save an entire world, that's a whole system that needs to be developed. So what I have here works okay. If we get into procedural generation, there's going to be a loading screen, and it's going to take a while to go, not a long time, but, a fraction of a second to transition from one scene to the next. And it seems to persist okay. But I don't like this. The reason why is that the cave is not really a separate world altogether, right? Like if we were using Minecraft as an analogy, if we go into the hell world, the nether, or if we go into, the end dimension, right, the moon, if you will, those kind of justify a loading screen because you're transitioning from one world to another. So in this game, if you were to take a portal to some chaos realm, right, like in Skyrim, I can see that would involve a scene change and a loading screen. But for just going underground by one level, that should not justify a loading screen or any kind of delay whatsoever. You can see here when I go from forest into cave, that doesn't take long. But when I go from cave to forest, you can notice just a little bit of a lag, right? And I find that just contributes to breaking immersion ever so slightly. What I want to do instead is to build a chunking system and build a layering system. And I've already kind of done that with the buildings. Right now we have certain buildings that have multiple floors, and that's implemented using different layers. So this is the farmhouse that only has one floor, but the tavern here, for example, this has multiple floors. And depending on if you go up here or underneath, right, those are handled by different layers. So like the base world level is just one layer, and then a layer 1, and then if you go up, it becomes layer 2, right? This is now layer 2, and then if you go up another floor, it becomes layer 3, and so on, right? So I think with the cave, the same idea applies, where the cave is layer, you could think of it as layer -1, right? So inside the Godot, so I think I'm going to reserve layers 1 to 8 here as the levels above the forest world, and then layers, say like 9 to 16 as the underground layers, right? All the way down to negative level 8 inside a dungeon. And then I might reserve 70 to 24 as the utility layers. So that's kind of my plan going forward. What that's going to allow us to experience is the world is just fully immersive. There's not going to be any lag when you go from forest to cave and vice versa. It will feel like one world, right? Okay, so that's the plan going forward. So a little bit of pitfalls that a bit of a detour that I took with development. I've also set up a project board. I thought I'd share this in case it might be interesting on how I'm handling my project management. So I have 3 tiers of priorities: P1, P2, and P3. P1 is things I want to work on immediately. P2 is sort of like maybe next week, second priority. P3 is major features that haven't yet been built. My general approach is I want to build each feature well, get the game to stable playable states with the additional each feature before moving on to the next. And so with this setup, I essentially just move these tickets over from left to right. So if it's something I'm actively working on now, it's in progress, and when it's done, I put it under the green column, and then after a while, I archive them into this third column here. So this project board is implemented on Notion, which I find it's even more powerful than Trello. But if you haven't tried Notion, definitely give it a try. I've also received a lot of great feedback from you guys. People have commented on my YouTube channel, and I've added many of those tickets here into my project board. So there were suggestions about arrow animations, about fade animations for hiding the roof, and blacking out the interiors of a building. So those are all on my project board, and Yeah, thank you so much for the suggestions. I'll be actually working on them and implementing them into the game, so you'll get to see them being built in real time, hopefully. Awesome. Well, thanks so much for watching this channel, and I'll keep you guys updated on my progress.